Alright guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Mail. So for today, going to be a pretty entertaining email that was sent from a subscriber. That's from a guy. He is 65 years old, and he shares his story, or a series of stories, of what led him down the R pill long before there was ever even talk of the R pill. He's going to share his story about the many different adventures he had, obviously in his 20s and I guess early 30s, and the different gals that he got involved with that taught him reality. Not what people want things to be, but reality, how things are, and the things that all you are well aware of. And you're going to see also that eventually when he was done all that, got married, had a good marriage, kids and all that, and recently, or years later, he was looking up these different gals, and let's just say that their lives didn't turn out too well. That'll be very good to go over here, guys. Very good, entertaining, long story. If you ever listen to me when you're on a long drive or working out at the gym, or just like kicking back and hearing the longer stories about guys' life and adventures, this is a good one. I think you definitely will have fun hearing. So it starts off. It says, "Dear SSM, I discovered your YouTube channels a few months ago, and I've been binge watching and listening to them ever since. I've listened to a few stories more than once because they are so entertaining. And so, you gotta be effing kidding me types of stories. Great lessons learned and advice in them. I wish your content was available when I was in my 20s. Perhaps I would have avoided some of the pitfalls I went through. However, the best way to learn a lesson is by living it." Hey, freaking med, man. Yeah, I wish I had me or somebody like me back when I was younger and clueless, but no, you had to learn the hard way. "I'm 65 years old, and I thought I would relate my experiences or how I got R-pilled. Of course, back in the day, R-pill as a term was non-existent. I used having your shit together. The term blue pill was just as meaningless back then. Instead of being blue-pilled, I used a non-flattering term when I was in the Air Force, weak dick, or whiskey delta. A term to describe guys that just couldn't get it up or otherwise couldn't step up to the plate regardless of their circumstances. I still use that term to this day. I love the old school terms. I like the old school guys that were in a time that not everybody was so, as they are nowadays. A little bit more about myself. I've been married for 33 years and have 2 adult children, one each. Like every endeavor that is successful, being married for that long requires a lot of effort from both parties, inner strength, shitloads of patience, and a willingness to compromise that both parties share to see it through. This story is not about my wife or my marriage. It is a story of the few or my more memorable girlfriends. These women shape my behavior, and in a way, I probably shape theirs. It's clear that women learn lessons from men as well, sometimes to their detriment. The names have been changed to protect the innocent and guilty alike, and yes, this is all true." Alright, so let's get started. He says, "My first serious relationship." And by the way, guys, this story is going to back up what I tell you, that guess what? It doesn't make a difference where you live, what your culture, religion, what time period, whether it's the 70s, 80s, or now. Women are women, men are men. We do the same things that we did back then as we do now, respond to the same things, etc., etc. In the fall of 1979, I was a brand new senior at a rigorous engineering college, and I was a member of a fraternity. I was an Air Force ROTC, full ride scholarship, and upon graduation was to be commissioned as a second lieutenant. I was awaiting orders for my first assignment. That fall, some of my fraternity brothers and I joined our university's orientation program for incoming freshmen. We did this in order to recruit incoming freshmen for our fraternity. We recruited both guys to become brothers in the frat and girls to become little sisters in the fraternity. Throughout the fraternity, I met some of my best friends I'm still in contact with to this day. That September, I also met my first serious girlfriend, Sarah, through the orientation program. I had 2 girls in high school, but nothing too serious and no SCX. Sarah was an incoming freshman. She was very intelligent, a brunette with great blue eyes, and like the song of the same name, she was a fat bottom girl. She was my first everything. I was not hers. How did you get to be a senior in college not getting laid yet, and in a frat? But that's your business. The attraction was mutual from the beginning, and within a few weeks, we were inseparable. I was falling hard for her, and at the time, she was doing the same. Meanwhile, already as a freshman, 18 years old, she already has had, as you just said, plenty of experience. And this is your first everything, and love, lay, all that. And guys typically make a lot of dumbass mistakes when it's their first love, first lay, all that. We sure were spending a lot of time together. She was staying over with me every night. This did not make my roommate too happy. But hey, my precious roommate did it to me. Oh, my previous roommate did it to me. It must have been part of the fraternity initiation. And aside here, Sarah's roommate, as you so eloquently put it, started riding the carousel and racked up about 10 different guys in the first 3 months since being away from home. The college was very rigorous, and the professors were known to weed out the low-hanging fruit. Sarah's roommate was gone by the spring quarter, March of 1980. For some folks, being away from home for the first time gives you a free license to do stupid. Yeah, that's why, for instance, my senior year in high school, my friends and I almost every weekend went to my friend's house to sleep over on Saturday night. We'd go bowling. We'd work during the daytime and the night and into the night. Then we would go meet up and do jackpot midnight bowling. We're all a bunch of 17, 18-year-olds. Previously, my friend who played football, who was a big giant dude, looked like he was 28, bought us alcohol. We stayed at my friend's house and drink. So by the time we did this the whole senior year in high school, we're all underage, but the dad knew we did it. He said, "Don't ever fucking leave or I'll kill you." Got out of our system. So by the time we got to college, it wasn't a big deal anymore. Now, that's a bit on the extreme side, but you understand my point. Speaking of stupid, Sarah and I were frequently having sex, but we're not using protection. Smack, jackass. And as Christmas approached, a sudden realization occurred that her period was not. Over Christmas break, I drove to my home and Sarah got a lift with a friend of mine, Paul, to her home. Oh, how nice of Paul. I couldn't handle being apart from her. Smack. For God's sakes, man. I was calling her every day on my parents' dime. Smack. We know darn well who ran that relationship, and she knew it too. You were putty in her hand. I was asking her every day if her period had come. It hadn't. Okay. I get you were worried about that. I thought you were just calling her because you missed her so much or whatever. My bad. It was so bad that once, I told Sarah's dad how much in love I was with his daughter. It was so bad that I was even looking at a map of her hometown state and city wondering where she was and what she was doing. I was also getting careless with what I was laying around my parents' house. My mom found a note about Sarah being pregnant, and I lied to my folks. Told them that it was just a false alarm, but it wasn't. In early January 1980, I drove back to college and arrived back at the fraternity house. My friend Paul, the friend that drove Sarah home, was also there. He made a comment to me about Sarah and her mom. At first, I didn't believe it, but it's such a trope. But it's also true. Paul's comment to me was that her mom was on the other side of fair, fat, and 40. And Sarah one day could end up looking just like her. His direct quote was, "If you want to see what a woman will be when she's older, just take a good look at her mom." I was told that by the time I was in junior high. And let me tell you guys, it's the absolute friggin' truth. You got young guys out there, you're dating your young pretty girl, you want to know what she's going to look like? Look at the mom. Absolutely. And even if it isn't just always like genetics, like if the mom's a porker, and she's going to be porker because of genetics. I mean, sometimes that can play an effect, don't get me wrong. But whether she realizes it or not, the mother is the big role model. So it's like, well, if my mom looked this way when she's older, I guess I have to look that way, or it's just how things are going to be. So keep that in mind. A day later, I picked Sarah up at the airport. She was stunning to my eyes and dressed very well. I could tell something was wrong immediately. She didn't want to talk to me, and I was getting the impression that her parents had a long talk with her about her relationship with me, how unhealthy it was, and so on. She never told her parents she was pregnant. I thought that she was going to break up with me. Eventually, she did tell me that she had reunited with her old boyfriend, and they looked at his etchings in his bedroom. She also told her old boyfriend that she was pregnant. They both cried. I was rather stoic about this, and frankly didn't know what to do. Bottom line, I did nothing and looked the other way with her cheating. Smack! You're telling me you got back with her, you continue on a relationship with her even though she was cheating on you? You see, guys, what happens with a lot of guys in their first love and the first woman they sleep with? I mean, they goo goo gaga. And what's that going to communicate to her? Oh, well, I can keep cheating on him. I can even treat him even worse because he ain't going anywhere. That's what happens when you jump into these relationships with both feet, as you did, my friend. I know you know this, but I got to point this out so young guys can learn. A week later, we went to the local clinic and had to do the procedure done. Turns out she was 6 weeks along. Don't let anyone tell you that guys don't suffer from this either. I often wonder what my now 43-year-old son and daughter would be doing, and whether or not I would be a granddad. Sarah was very emotional afterwards, and we learned our lesson the hard way. Never again, no protection. Sarah got on the pill through the college pharmacy, and soon we were back to our routine of her staying overnight and us effing regularly. Why the hell are you still with her? She was fucking cheating on you, dude. Okay, I can get that you had to deal with that situation. That's what you chose to do. That's your business. I'm not saying I agree with or disagree with it, but that was how you handled it then. But still, you shouldn't have been with her. At spring break, March 1980, another friend, Mike, and I drove Sarah home. Both Mike and I stayed with her older sister, Pam. Mike has 2 older sisters, and Pam was the oldest of the 2. Pam had just got married and recently moved to the same state and the city that Sarah was from. After arriving, we dropped Sarah off, met her family, and then Mike and I drove off. A day later, I had a long sit-down chat with Sarah and her mom. Unfortunately, I had something for breakfast that did not agree with my gut, most likely spoiled milk. I had a very bad reaction that was causing gas to build up. So about every 10 minutes or so, I was getting up and going to the bathroom and doing the thing. Not a good first impression, I'm sure. Aside from my frequent flatulence, I was a bit freaked out about what my friend Paul had told me. Remember, check out the mom to see what Sarah was going to look like when she gets older. Holy cow. Paul's description was quite accurate. On the plump side of fair, fat, and 40. Guys, do you know how many gals I went to high school with? They were pretty. They were athletes, cheerleaders, whatever. And just 10 years after I graduated high school, the 10-year reunion and everything, I actually went to that. Saw some buddies. These girls, it was like, what happened? Holy crap. Holy Jabba the Hutt. And then now, as I'm coming up, let me think here. I guess in a couple of years I'll have the 30th reunion. I'm not going to go. I can't begin to imagine what these gals look like. Maybe they lost the weight. Maybe some of them got back in shape. I don't know what, but yeah. Trust me. I don't know exactly what when she told me this, but around this time we were having a discussion about relationships with a few other folks at the frat house. During the discussion, Sarah stated that it is okay to want to sleep with other folks. Now that is a big red flag that I promptly ignored. Smack! See? After you took her back that first time, showed her that, hey, I can do this type of stuff. I chalked up to her cheating on me with her old boyfriend when she was pregnant. Later in June of 1980, I graduated with a degree in aerospace engineering, got commissioned as a brand new second lieutenant, and received my orders. My orders were to an Air Force base in Southern California, but I was not to report for another 7 months. Sarah went home for the summer, and I stayed in the city where my college was located. I was able to get a temporary job while waiting for active duty. I was able to get some time off, so I made another trip to see Sarah in her home in the summer of 1980. This time I stayed at Sarah's house. Her parents and 2 sisters were there. Sarah ended up hooking up in her family room one night after her parents and sisters went to bed. We hooked up in her family car, the woods, on the beach, and we were also taking a driving tour to a local tourist trap that was a few hours away. In reality, we drove away about an hour away, checked into a hotel, and hooked up all day long. Well, at least you're getting laid, but you should have broken up with her a long time ago. But it was your first of many things. By the middle of the fall school schedule in 1980, Sarah was back at college, was growing a bit restless. You really think the girl who cheated on you and probably cheated on you more than you realized is going to stay true and blue to you and faithful while you're away in the military and she's back at school? No way, Jose. She wanted to experience more with other people, even though we were committed to each other. Sounds like she wanted an open relationship, even though they didn't call it then. I think the realization that I was finally leaving sunk in. She started to hang out with 2 other guys after classes and while I was at work, and then one night, the unthinkable happened. I didn't know where she was. My gut was telling me she was with one of those guys. So in the age before the internet, I had to find out where the guy lived. And I did. I drove to his apartment, banged on the front door, and his roommate answered and let me in. I went to this guy's bedroom, and there in all her naked glory was Sarah and the guy, both in his bed. I only said one thing, "What the fuck are you doing?" And her response was, "Oh shit." So what did I say in the beginning? What did I say? That she cheated on you and you should have dumped her ass after you handled things. I told you. I know you know this. So you young guys out there that are going to take back your girlfriend because she cheated and she's giving the waterworks and telling you and promising you everything, here's another example. Meanwhile, the guy was just laying there speechless. You never get that image out of your head. Ever. I drove back to my apartment. No tears, nothing. I was numb. The relationship was over. I just hadn't told myself that yet. By this time, I was very close to leaving. We never broke up officially. We did have sex a few more times before I left. Smack! What the hell is the matter with young you? Jesus Christ, man. I don't remember her apologizing to her, but I can explain. I'm sure she said something, but I just wiped it from my memory. I would have put it past her not to say anything, because she figured no matter what I do, this jackass will keep taking me back. After arriving at the base in Southern California, I checked in and started doing the Air Force thing. Soon I was in a flying position and was routinely flying T-38s and F-4s. It was a dream job. Cool, man. Focus on that instead of your dumbass ex-girlfriend. I still kept in touch with Sarah on and off. Smack! Why? God's sakes, you were a frat guy, you're a military guy. Believe me, unless you were not exactly good looking back then, you should have an unlimited supply of tits and ass not banging down your door. Why her? Yes, we all are victims to that first one, I get it, but still. One of the last discussions I had with Sarah, I remembered clearly. She stated, sleeping with other people is not the answer and does not bring closure. She was afraid I was sleeping around. What the fuck? By then, I had started dating other girls. Good. Who the hell does she think she is to have any kind of say what you do with other women after everything that happened? Really? Some I slept with, some I did not. Nothing very serious. I was working through the issues. I had my relationship with Sarah. Although it sounds quick, getting my shit together actually took a year and a half to process. I went from she effed me over to I allowed her to F me over, to finally admitting that I effed over myself. Good. Thank you. Good for you. She's an a-hole. We can all agree on that, and I stand by that. But you were a dumb a-hole too that kept taking her back and allowed her to do that. You know, a lot of people give me crap saying that I'm victim blaming or victim shaming. There's a point when the person who's always falling into these bad situations has to take accountability and blame for putting themselves repeatedly in those same situations or with the same people that hurt them. There's a point that you can't feel bad for them anymore. And I'm glad you took responsibility for this. The last time I saw Sarah was in the spring of 1982. I managed to get a 3-day weekend trip and went back to college, primarily to touch base with a few of my fraternity brothers, and who I am kidding, to see Sarah. I did manage to see her. We talked for a while. I do remember kissing her. Smack! God's sakes. The discussion was so meaningful that I don't remember anything about it. That was it. Nothing else happened. She left. Later that evening, the fraternity held a band party, and I met a freshman girl, and we hit off. I don't remember her name. The next day, I spent most of it, if not all of it, the day with her, and we did eventually go back to her dorm room. And of course, we had sex. Later, I returned to the frat house, and one of my brothers told me that Sarah had been looking for me. At that point, I knew it was over, back to California, and I never spoke to Sarah again. Thank the Lord. Good. I'm glad you nailed another chick. And let it get back to her. She deserved that. And you needed that to get past her and get over her. And here's the question. All these years later, does she look like her mom? Well, we'll find out later. Next part of the story, his next girl leading him down the Arb pill path to New Zealand. By this time, some fellow lieutenants and I discovered one of the benefits of being on active duty. Space A. Space available. Flights to Hawaii and back for long weekends. The California Guard flew to Hawaii on a fairly regular basis. Once in a while, we would take hops out of a van. I can't pronounce this. It was always a risk getting stuck somewhere flying Space A, but we always got lucky. While in Hawaii, we did not really get into heavy partying, but just the usual bland items of hitting up the tourist girls, drinking those drinks with umbrellas, etc. I also discovered that about twice a month there were flights out of San Bernardino going all the way to Australia and New Zealand. So I started formulating a plan. Take about 2 weeks of leave that I had to build up and start looking for folks to go with me. With preparation started, I hit up some friends to see if they were interested. But none of them were willing to go such a long distance, risk getting stuck somewhere, or worse yet, having to pay commercial to fly back if no Space A were available. One day in the O Club, the officers' club, I came across 2 nurses, both lieutenants, stationed at the hospital. Nurses, huh? I smell trouble. One named Marty was a neighbor of mine in the BOQ, Bachelor's Officers' Quarters, fourplex. Her boyfriend Peter was there, along with another friend of hers, Annie. Annie was a very cute redhead and seemed very intelligent to me. Uh-oh. Watch out for those redheads, man. And a nurse redhead. Two of my criteria. I briefly mentioned the Australia-New Zealand Space A idea to all of them. There was some interest. A few days later, I ran to Marty, and she mentioned that her, Peter, and Annie were interested in going. Not Annie's boyfriend. By then, I'd done some recon on Annie and found out her boyfriend, John, was an enlisted airman at the base hospital. Definitely frowned upon by the Air Force. But hey, who am I to judge? By then, I had a fling with a senior airman named Terry, a very pretty blonde. We all became very serious about the trip. We had to get passports, a visa for Australia, a queue, and arrange for leave. Coordinate with our commanders on the trip details, etc. We felt 2 weeks would give us enough time. Peter had to bow out at the last minute due to some sort of work-related issue that had come up. John, Annie's boyfriend, was not going because I don't know why, he just wasn't. So before everyone's mind goes to every man's favorite fantasy of 2 women at once, no, that did not happen. Well, that's what I was thinking was going to happen. But I will say this. By then, I was no longer a weak dick. I could not understand how any guy could let his woman go on an exotic trip to an exotic land with any guy beside himself. Yeah, well, sir, college you with your ex Sarah would have done that. We all know it. So come on here. You would have done the same dumbass thing back then when you were all in love with Sarah before finally the hard way seeing her true colors. To make a long story short, we eventually got on a manifest to Australia. Australia was the next stop after a layover in Hawaii. While in Hawaii, some additional passengers got on board. Of note for this story, a Coast Guard commander and his wife, Jim and Mary. We landed in Australia at 2 a.m. local time. Not a good time to do anything worthy of thought. The loadmaster talked to us and told us that they already had picked up the cargo and 2 passengers and were soon to leave for Christchurch. We all decided to go to New Zealand. The short version of the story is that the 5 of us, Annie, Marty, Jim, Mary, myself, drove to the South Island of New Zealand. Since this story is not a New Zealand travelogue, I'll skip the trip details, but if you get the chance, while all this touristy shit is going on, Annie and I had started flirting, and by the time we got to Te Now, however the hell you pronounce that, the S-word tension between us was palpable. Everyone noticed. Jim commented on it. Still in Te Anau, one night, Annie and I decided to go to the hot tub and the hotel next door. And before your mind goes there, yes, we were in bathing suits. And no, we did not get naked. But the discussions we had ramped up the tension between us even more. Seducing the mind works best. Doesn't she have a boyfriend? Isn't Annie with John? Dude, what the fuck? Not cool. But I know a younger you is different here. We eventually got back to Christchurch and shortly got a hop back to Hawaii. Marty, Annie, and I had a 2-day layover waiting for the next hop back to California. Marty, either at the urging of Annie or her own, decided to fly a commercial back to Los Angeles because she missed Peter. That left Annie and I in Hawaii for 2 days. And yes, now your imagination can run wild. All I can say is wow. Well, that'll teach you some R-pill knowledge, because unless I'm mistaken here and read it wrong, Annie had a boyfriend back home and you were nailing a chick with a boyfriend. Not fucking cool, dude. After getting back to our home base, Annie broke up with her boyfriend, John. We started dating. Oh, so you're going to get involved with a cheater. How does that usually work out, my man? You were dating a cheater before, and how'd that work out for you? I began to think that Annie may be the one. Smack! And some fucking smacks for sleeping with a woman who had a boyfriend. I was even the first person to give her the big O, though through normal intercourse. Get the fuck out of here. She's faking. Come on. She never experienced that before and was wowed by it. Bullshit. Bullshit. Still, it was way too soon to make anything official, so we dated and hung out when we could. By then, I'd been selected for another flying position that required a stringent interview and clearance process. I was known to be gone for days at a time, sometimes for weeks. Oh, what could happen? What could possibly go wrong with Annie while you're away for many weeks at a time when she now has a history of cheating on boyfriends? One night, Annie knocked on my door. It was around 1 o'clock in the morning. I knew Annie was working second shift at the hospital, so I didn't think much of it. She sat me down, looked me, and told me that she wanted to break up with me. She woke me up to tell me this. She still had feelings for John. Ah, the warning signs. What warning signs? I was totally caught off guard. Well, you're thinking I gave her the big O, the first O she ever had. She ain't going anywhere. Meanwhile, she's a redhead. I think she's a redhead. She's a nurse, ding, 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 and she's a cheater. Obviously, while I was away, she was playing with John. I would like to think out of hubris that she was scared of a relationship with me, but to this day, I can't figure out her thought process in all this. Because they don't think rationally, they think emotionally, and typically how they feel in that exact moment determines their actions. I was gone a lot, and John wasn't, and that probably was it. I thought then, and still think to this day, that John was a loser, uneducated, and no desire to change. Annie was smart and could dominate him. Go figure. Devastated is too strong a word for me how I was feeling. Pissed off, sad, numb come to mind though. My experience with Sarah were telling me that John would not be able to get through the thought of me banging his girl out of his head. Well, dude, this is your karma for knowingly hooking up with a chick that had a boyfriend. Whether she was going to break up with him or not, it doesn't matter. You know, and once a cheater, always a cheater. She's going to do it to that guy. She'll do it to you. But do you see, guys, why I'm doing this story here? Aside from entertainment, these are things that led him down the R-pill path right here. This is before me on YouTube. I don't know why any guy would take a woman back after knowing that she was taking her panties off for some other dude, laying on top of her and enjoying it. You did. Cheating on your significant other is a series of decisions, with the last one being her taking her panties off or the guy taking her panties off after she lifts her ass. John was a real prick after Annie went back to him. One night he took dog crap and spread it on my car door handle. Dude, if he was banging your girlfriend, wouldn't you want to do something to him too? I was really pissed and went over to Annie's BOQ around 2 in the morning after I discovered the dog crap. John was there. I banged on her window. She woke up with John, and I told her under no certain terms to keep John away from me, or I would do something that could really damage her. That was to turn her in for sleeping with an enlisted guy, career ending, and I really did not want to do that. Meanwhile, I was doing my own thing. I was flying to work in an F4, was going supersonic, pulling G's in dogfights, and just all around really into my purpose. Good, that's what you're supposed to be doing. It was truly the best job I ever had. I could be gone for a week, sometimes longer, and would come back home, rinse and repeat. Where I was going had enough female companionship. I was truly drinking, driving, flying, and fucking. There you go. So why have a girlfriend in this stage in your life? A small side story here. I met another nurse. Oh my God. Mary at the O Club. She knew all about Annie, as our relationship was the talk of the hospital nursing staff. Oh, you mean 30-some years ago women liked to gossip and talk? Who would have thought? Mary happened to be going TDY, temporary duty, at another base near San Francisco, and I had already made plans to be in San Francisco at the same time to see a relative. We made plans to connect, and she could stay with me with my aunt as well. Oh, I'm sure you were more than happy to have her come over. I was not really interested in her at the time. After some fun at Pier 39, we went back to my aunt's house. Mary was in a bedroom, and I was camped out on the living room floor. Mary invited me back to her bed that night. Of course, I went along with it, but soon my gut was telling me this was not good. Not for my sake, but for Mary's. Mary was the first, but not the last, where I actively made a decision not to have SEX. Trust your gut. Well, it's about time. A few months later, one of my friends, another lieutenant named Margot, was having a get-together with a number of friends and cohorts at the BOQ. I was invited, and Annie was there as well. Oh, was John there? Annie's boyfriend John was not there. Just an aside, a few years later, Annie married John. More to that later. There was music and good drinks, and in general, I was having a good time. Since the breakup, I never spoke with Annie. And that remains true to this day. No contact is the way to go. After a while, I noticed that there were only 6 women at the party, and I had been with 4 of them, including Annie and Margot. Some of the girls knew about one another, but none of them knew about all of them. I chuckled to myself. By the next morning, I'd been with 5 of them. You playa. So guys, this is long. This is the end of the first part of this guy's story. I'm going to be doing part 2 in a couple hours because this is a very long story. And if you enjoyed hearing about this, what's leading down the R-pill path, as you can clearly see, we're not done yet. and we'll continue on here, and then you get to hear in the end where a lot of these gals are many decades later, and it won't surprise any of you guys at all. So if you enjoy this, stick around a couple hours. I'll have part 2 coming up. See you then.